They said I shouldn't drive anymore. Not in those exact words, of course, because Michael and Clara were far too practiced in the delicate art of emotional manipulation to ever be so blunt. It was always couched in concern, draped in a saccharine veil of love for my well-being. A constant hum of gentle suggestions that felt less like advice and more like a carefully orchestrated strangulation. It began subtly enough, with Michael tutting over a scratch on the garage wall I barely remembered making, a small inconsequential mark that suddenly became evidence of my failing faculties. Then Clara would chime in, her voice like spun sugar, about how much easier it would be for me if they handled the errands, how stressful city driving must be for someone my age. Someone my age. 72 years etched onto my skin. Yes, but still vibrant beneath the surface, still sharp where it counted, still capable. The car, my old faithful sedan, a relic of better days and countless road trips with Arthur, became a cage, its steering wheel a symbol of my diminishing world, its engine a ticking clock, counting down to my perceived obsolescence. They spoke of my safety, of their worries, of the danger I posed to myself and others. Never mind the decades of impeccable driving, the lack of even a single serious accident, the freedom those four wheels had always represented. It was easier for them to believe I was fragile, to box me into the category of elderly dependent, because that fit their narrative, neatly aligning with the future they had meticulously planned for me. A future that coincidentally involved a significant reduction in my independence and, by extension, my financial autonomy. I would sit across from them at my own dining table, the same table where Arthur and I had hosted countless boisterous family dinners, and watch their carefully constructed expressions of solicitude. Michael, with his practiced frown lines mirroring a concern he didn't truly feel, and Clara, her smile unwavering even as her eyes fleetingly would dart towards the heirloom clock on the mantelpiece, calculating, always calculating. They spoke of the house too, how big it was for just one person, how it was a burden to maintain, how much money it tied up. It wasn't money tied up to them. It was potential, liquid assets waiting to be unlocked, waiting to be diverted into their burgeoning investment portfolio, perhaps, or towards their son's exorbitant private school fees. The implication was always there, unspoken but deafening. Sell the house, surrender the car, move into a smaller place, maybe even one closer to them, where I could be more easily monitored, more conveniently controlled. A bird in a gilded cage, my wings clipped by the very hands that professed to love me most. The memory of my husband, Arthur, would often float into my mind during these conversations, a wistful ache in my chest. He would have seen right through them, his booming laugh shattering their delicate charade. He would have stood by me, defended my right to live my life on my own terms. But Arthur was gone. 5 years now, and his absence was a gaping chasm. They seemed determined to fill with their suffocating care. It was a slow erosion, not a sudden landslide, which made it all the more insidious. Each suggestion chipped away at my confidence. Each concern planted a seed of doubt. I found myself second-guessing simple maneuvers, checking the rearview mirror an extra time, feeling a phantom tremor in my hands, when I knew, deep down, they were steady. That was their true victory, wasn't it? To make me believe their lies, to internalize their manufactured fears, to willingly step down from the driver's seat of my own life. The irony was a bitter taste on my tongue. I had lived a life of quiet strength, navigating challenges with resilience, raising a son who now seemed so determined to undermine me. I had managed our finances, cared for Arthur through his long illness, kept this house a home, but now it seemed all that counted for naught. All that mattered was my age, a number they used as a weapon, a convenient excuse to strip away my autonomy. The thought chafed, raw and red, beneath my composed exterior. I would nod, I would smile faintly, I would murmur agreeable sounds, but inside, a quiet rebellion was taking root, a tiny, defiant spark in the ashes of my resignation. They didn't see it, of course. They never truly looked beyond the surface, beyond the comfortable image of the placid, aging mother who was gradually, gracefully ceding control. They were so focused on their endgame, on the spoils they imagined were rightfully theirs, that they entirely missed the transformation brewing within me, slow and steady as the tide. The air in my home, once filled with the warmth of shared laughter and the scent of Arthur's pipe tobacco, now felt thin, stretched taut with their unspoken expectations. Every visit from Michael and Clara was a performance, a meticulously choreographed ballet of subtle digs and feigned solicitude. "Mother, are you sure you locked the back door last night?" "I just thought I'd check," Michael would say, his hand already on the doorknob, his eyes sweeping the room as if cataloging every potential lapse in my vigilance. Clara, meanwhile, would be in the kitchen, reorganizing my spice rack, clucking softly about expiry dates. "Don't you worry, Eleanor, dear. We'll take that old set of pots and pans off your hands. Michael's been eyeing a new set for you. Something lighter, easier to lift." It was all designed to infantilize me, to chip away at my competence, to make me feel helpless and dependent. Their voices, though soft and gentle, were like sandpaper on my nerves. I would offer polite resistance. I murmured, "Oh, I'm quite fine, thank you," or "I prefer my own method," but it rarely made a difference. They would simply smile, a practiced, knowing smile, as if humoring a difficult child, and proceed with their self-appointed tasks. The house, which had been my sanctuary for 40 years, felt increasingly like a stage for their slow-motion takeover. They began discussing hypothetical renovations, hinting at structural changes that would future-proof the property, but which I knew were designed to make it more appealing to a younger buyer, a potential buyer who wasn't me. I heard them whispering about property values, about the market, about optimizing the return. My home, my life, reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. My resentment, initially a low thrum beneath the surface, began to pulse with a more insistent rhythm. I found myself observing them with a detached, almost scientific curiosity, watching their expressions, cataloging their phrases. Michael's dismissive wave of the hand when I tried to express an opinion, Clara's overly enthusiastic agreement with his every word, her eagerness to reinforce his authority. It was a familiar dance, one I had witnessed since they married, but now it was directed solely at me, and its purpose was devastatingly clear. One afternoon, while I was ostensibly resting in the sitting room, feigning a slight headache after one of their particularly trying visits, I overheard Michael talking to Clara in the kitchen, his voice pitched low, but still audible through the old walls. He was on the phone, his tone conspiratorial. "No, she's still resisting, but we're getting there. The house is a gold mine, really, once we clear it out. And with her off the roads, it's only a matter of time before she agrees to something smaller, more manageable. The equity alone would set us up nicely." He paused, listening. "Oh, she's seen the brochures for the new X7. She knows what we like. It's subtle, but effective. She'll want to contribute, I'm sure. A new X7, the current model, a luxury SUV, far beyond anything I would ever consider buying for myself, even if I were still driving. It was a car of opulence, of status, a symbol of their aspirations, and they expected me to contribute to it. The audacity of it stole my breath. Not just to take my independence, but to leverage my declining years, my perceived helplessness, to fund their lavish desires. The idea of me buying them that car, or contributing to it, under the guise of my safety or my legacy, was a bitter pill to swallow. It wasn't about my driving at all, was it? It was never about my driving. It was about their driving, their future, their wants. It was about seeing me as a resource, a means to an end, a withered branch they could prune for their own gain. The shock of this revelation, bald and undeniable, didn't shatter me. Instead, it hardened something inside me, forged it into something akin to steel. The tears I felt welling up were not of sadness or resignation, but of righteous fury. They had gone too far. They had crossed a line, mistaking my quiet nature for weakness, my patience for compliance. They thought I was a puppet, ready to dance to their tune. But puppets, I remembered, sometimes cut their own strings, and then sometimes they learned to pull others. The thought of the X7, sleek and powerful, a monstrous symbol of their entitlement, began to morph in my mind. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was a challenge, a weapon, a mirror I could hold up to their ugly greed. And in that moment, the first spark of my rebellion truly ignited, glowing fiercely in the quiet solitude of my living room. The days that followed were a peculiar blend of quiet observation and simmering determination. I maintained my usual placid demeanor, nodding vaguely when Michael mentioned the practicality of a smaller vehicle for me, or when Clara gushed about the safety features of certain luxury SUVs. I even went so far as to peruse the brochures they conveniently left on my coffee table, feigning interest, my finger tracing the lines of expensive models, my mind a whirl of calculations. They thought I was capitulating, that their relentless pressure was finally wearing me down. They were so busy congratulating themselves on their subtle tactics that they completely missed the subtle shift in my eyes, the slight tightening around my lips that wasn't weakness, but resolve. I started making phone calls, quiet ones, when they weren't around. First to a former colleague of Arthur's, a retired solicitor named Mr. Davies, whose reputation for sharp wit and uncompromising ethics had always preceded him. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but his voice, though older, still held that reassuring timbre of quiet competence. I explained my situation, carefully omitting the more emotional details, focusing instead on the legal ambiguities of their attempts to manage my affairs. Mr. Davies listened patiently, his occasional or indeed the only interruptions. He agreed to see me the following week. My next calls were to my bank, then to a local car dealership, not the one Michael frequented, but a competitor known for its discretion. I didn't mince words. I wanted to see the X7, the exact model, the exact trim, the exact specifications Michael had been drooling over. The sales manager, a young man named Tom, was surprisingly attentive, perhaps sensing an unusual opportunity. He arranged for a private viewing at a time when I knew Michael and Clara would be otherwise engaged. The car itself was an impressive beast, sleek and imposing, its interior a symphony of fine leather and polished chrome. It was, I had to admit, a magnificent machine, a symbol of unbridled luxury and power. As I sat in the driver's seat, the scent of new car leather filling my nostrils, a wave of bittersweet irony washed over me. This was the car they wanted. This was the car they dreamed of. And here I was, Eleanor Vance, the woman deemed too frail to drive, contemplating its purchase. But not for them, and not for me to drive. Not in the way they imagined. The idea solidified, becoming a tangible plan. I would buy it, with my own money, money they assumed they would eventually control, money they thought I was too idle to manage effectively. The sales manager, accustomed to clients who wished to test drive, looked at me curiously when I declined the offer. "No, thank you," I said, my voice calm. "I'm quite certain I'll take it." He looked surprised. Then a hint of a smile touched his lips. "Cash or finance, Mrs. Vance?" "Cash," I replied, a small triumphant thrill pulsing through me. "And I'll need it delivered, discreetly." The transaction was surprisingly swift. Mr. Davies had helped me untangle some of the subtle financial traps Michael had laid, ensuring my liquid assets were truly liquid and accessible only to me. It turned out my son had already put out feelers to my bank, just checking on Mother's accounts, a thinly veiled attempt to gain insight into my financial standing. Mr. Davies had swiftly put a stop to that. The car arrived a few days later, a gleaming monument to defiance, pulled into my long driveway on the back of a covered transport truck, just as I had instructed. Michael and Clara were out of town for the weekend, attending a wellness retreat they had strongly encouraged me to join, a suggestion I had politely but firmly declined. The delivery driver, a burly man with kind eyes, gave me a quizzical look as he unloaded the vehicle. "Beautiful car, ma'am. You'll love driving this." I simply smiled, a private, knowing smile. "Oh, I'm sure I will," I said, patting the cool, dark bonnet. Just not in the way you might expect. He shrugged, finished his paperwork, and left, leaving me alone with the magnificent machine, glittering in the afternoon sun. It sat there, an alien presence in my familiar driveway, a silent testament to my quiet rebellion. It represented everything they coveted, everything they thought they had wrested away from me. But now, it was mine, and the game I knew had just begun. The silence of the house seemed to hum with anticipation. The return of Michael and Clara was met with a calculated calm on my part. They swept in, full of effusive stories about their retreat, their faces glowing with a self-satisfied healthiness that I found intensely irritating. Michael paused at the threshold, his gaze falling, inevitably on the driveway. His eyes widened, then narrowed. Clara, trailing behind him, gasped. The X7, a dark, imposing presence, shimmered under the afternoon sun. Its presence was a silent, opulent shout. "Mother," Michael began, his voice a strained whisper. What is that?" I turned from the hall table, where I had been arranging a vase of late-blooming roses, my expression serene. "Oh, that," I said, as if it were a trivial matter. "It's the new car. You remember? The one you were telling me about. The X7. Such a lovely machine, isn't it?" Clara rushed forward, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her mouth. But Eleanor, dear, why? We talked about a smaller, more practical car for you. Something easier to manage." Her voice was a mixture of shock and something darker, a barely concealed fury. "Indeed," I replied, picking up a stray rose petal and examining it. "But this is the one you seemed so enthusiastic about, wasn't it? The one with all the advanced safety features. The one you said you liked so much." I thought, well, if I'm not going to be driving much, I might as well have something that truly represents what's best. Michael recovered first, his mind no doubt racing, trying to understand how this perfectly aligned with his plans for their new X7. He approached the car, circling it slowly, his hand running along the sleek paintwork, a look of awe warring with confusion on his face. It's magnificent, Mother. But who will drive it?" I met his gaze, a flicker of amusement in my eyes. "Well, certainly not me, dear. Not with my supposedly failing faculties. But I have arranged for a driver. A wonderful young man recommended by Mr. Davies. Punctual, discreet, and a superb driver. It only seemed logical, wouldn't you say? If I'm not driving, then I still need a way to get about. And if I'm to have a car, it might as well be a comfortable one. One that ensures my safety. As you always say." Michael straightened, his jaw tightening. "A driver? Mother, that's an enormous expense. Unnecessary, really. Clara and I are perfectly happy to drive you wherever you need to go." "Oh, I know you are, darling," I said, my voice dripping with false sweetness, "and I truly appreciate it. But sometimes, well, one simply needs a little more flexibility. Wouldn't you agree? And I prefer not to be a burden." The word burden hung in the air, a barb aimed squarely at their hypocritical concern. Clara, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward. "But Eleanor, this cause—" "I said it must have cost a fortune." "Where did you get the funds? Have you been withdrawing from your savings?" Her voice was sharper now, the veneer of politeness cracking. "My finances are my own, Clara," I said, my voice suddenly firm, losing its saccharine edge. And yes, it was a significant investment, but one I considered necessary for my future comfort, and as Michael so eloquently put it, my safety. And of course, it also serves as a perfectly good store of value should circumstances ever change. A wise investment. I think Mr. Davies would agree. The mention of Mr. Davies, the solicitor, was a subtle but potent weapon. Their faces, momentarily, blanched. They hadn't expected me to seek legal counsel, to actually be prepared. They had assumed my financial affairs were still tangled in the neat little bow Michael had tied for them. The beautiful, imposing car, a symbol of their greed, now sat in my driveway, a stark monument to my unexpected resurgence. It was theirs for the taking, in theory the kind of car they had coveted. But it was mine, and I was using it, not to drive, but to drive them insane. The new routine began swiftly. Elias, the driver recommended by Mr. Davies, was a young man with a quiet demeanor and an impeccable sense of timing. He arrived each morning precisely at 9, the gleaming X7 polished to perfection, its engine purring softly. I would emerge from the house, dressed immaculately, perhaps a little more stylishly than they were accustomed to seeing me, and settle into the luxurious rear seat. My destinations were carefully chosen, not to the grocery store, not to the doctor's office. Those were still within Michael and Clara's domain, a carefully preserved illusion of my dependency. No, my destinations were far more strategic. My first destination, nearly every other day, was Mr. Davies's office.
Elias would drive me there, park discreetly, and wait. Inside, Mr. Davies and I would meticulously review my financial statements, the complex web of trusts and investments Michael had established, ostensibly for my benefit, but designed with his own interests in mind.
Mr. Davies, with a knowing glint in his eye, would patiently explain the legal implications, the subtle clauses, the ways in which control had been quietly siphoned away from me. Each meeting was a slow, deliberate untangling, a re-establishment of my authority over my own money, my own property, my own life. Michael and Clara, when they called, would ask with forced casualness about my day. Just out for a little drive, dear. I'd say, my voice light, enjoying the fresh air, running a few errands. It's simply wonderful not to have to worry about parking, isn't it? Their frustration was palpable, even through the phone line. They couldn't understand why I was suddenly so busy, why I was going out so often, why I hadn't once asked them for a ride. The X7, a silent witness to my newfound independence, irked them. It was a constant reminder of their miscalculation, a glaring symbol of the funds they believed were already earmarked for their future. Mother, we really must talk about the car's expenses, Michael said one evening, his voice tight. The fuel, the driver's salary, the insurance. It's simply unsustainable for you. Nonsense, dear, I replied, sipping my tea. Mr. Davies assures me my financial position is quite robust, and it's such a comfort to know I can go where I please, when I please, without imposing on anyone. The word imposing hung heavy, a veiled accusation against their attempts to control my movements. Besides Mr. Davies's office, I started visiting other places. Old friends I hadn't seen in years, now free from the subtle guilt trips about their distance being too much of a bother for Michael to drive me. I went to art galleries, to the botanical gardens, even to the local university library, rekindling old interests. Each outing was a small, triumphant act of defiance, a quiet reclaiming of the vibrant life they had tried to dim. Elias, my silent accomplice, became a familiar, comforting presence. He never pried, never commented, simply opened doors and drove with a professional smoothness that made even the longest journeys feel effortless. He was a perfect counterpoint to Michael and Clara's suffocating intrusions. The X7, a vehicle of luxury and excess, was not just transporting me, it was transporting my will, my resolve, my reawakened sense of self. It was the instrument of my stealthy resurgence. One afternoon I instructed Elias to drive past Michael and Clara's house. I saw Clara in the garden, watering her roses, and I waved cheerfully from the back seat of the gleaming SUV. She froze, the watering can tipping, a look of pure, unadulterated shock on her face. Her eyes, wide and disbelieving, followed the car until it disappeared around the bend. It was a small victory, almost childish in its simplicity, but immensely satisfying. They had wanted me to be small, to be meek, to be contained. They had wanted me to buy their car, but they had never anticipated that my purchase of their car would become the very mechanism of my escape, the engine of my quiet revenge. And the best part? They still had no idea what was truly unfolding. The veneer of politeness that Michael and Clara had meticulously maintained began to crack, slowly at first, then with increasing frequency. Their phone calls became shorter, their visits less frequent, yet each interaction was charged with a palpable tension. They stopped asking where I was going, presumably because the answers were always innocuous. The library, a friend's for tea, the market. But the underlying suspicion, the frustrated curiosity, was a tangible thing, a thick, suffocating cloud. The car became a symbol of my enigmatic autonomy, an expensive, powerful enigma in my driveway. It mocked their assumptions. It absorbed their inquiries. It amplified their growing sense of unease. "Mother, we're just concerned about your financial situation," Michael said one afternoon, attempting to revert to his caring son persona. "That car, and the driver, it's a substantial drain. Perhaps we should revisit the idea of a financial advisor, someone neutral, to help you manage things more efficiently." I smiled, a faint, polite curve of my lips. "Oh, but I have, dear. Miss Davies is proving to be quite excellent in that regard. He's been wonderfully helpful in untangling some of the more complex arrangements." The mention of Miss Davies again was a strategic strike. Michael's face tightened. Clara, perched on the edge of the sofa, shifted uncomfortably. They had hoped to corner me, perhaps even coerce me into handing over control of my accounts. Instead, I had fortified my position with a legal expert, someone outside their manipulative sphere. The idea of a financial advisor had been Michael's original attempt to gain direct access to my funds after Arthur died. Now, I had turned their own tactic against them. The slow burn tension in the house was almost unbearable. A silent battle waged over cups of tea and polite conversation. I started making deliberate points of discussing my newfound activities, a renewed interest in gardening, plans to volunteer at the local animal shelter, even the possibility of joining a book club. All activities that required independence, activities that hinted at a vibrant life unfolding beyond their pure view, activities that certainly didn't require me to be driven by them. One evening, I received a call from Michael's bank. A junior manager, clearly uncomfortable, explained that Michael had tried to access my account details again, claiming he had power of attorney. He seemed quite insistent. "Mrs. Vance," the manager stammered. "He said you were, well, a little forgetful lately." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Forgetful. The word was a carefully chosen poison. It was the ultimate weapon in their arsenal, the final justification for stripping away my rights. This wasn't just about money, it was about my mental faculties, my very identity. It was a direct assault. "Thank you for informing me," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Please assure Miss Vance that I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. And please inform him that any further attempts to access my accounts without my explicit written permission will be met with severe legal consequences. Mr. Davies will be in touch." I hung up, my hand trembling slightly, not from fear but from a surge of righteous indignation. They were not just attempting to control my finances, they were attempting to undermine my sanity, to paint me as senile. This was the breaking point. The time for subtle maneuvers was over. The game had escalated, and I was ready to play my final hand. The following morning, I instructed Elias to drive me to a specific destination, a local print shop. I had a document prepared, a meticulously worded letter drafted by Mr. Davies, outlining my explicit revocation of any implied authority Michael or Clara believed they held over my affairs. It detailed my intention to appoint Mr. Davies as my sole legal representative for all financial and property matters, and it included a clear statement of my sound mental health, supported by a recent medical evaluation Mr. Davies had quietly arranged. The print shop produced several crisp official-looking copies. Then, I had Elias drive me to Michael and Clara's house. I walked up their pristine pathway, a copy of the letter tucked neatly into my handbag, feeling a quiet sense of power radiating from me. The X7 sat idling at the curb, a dark, gleaming sentinel. Its presence, a silent testament to my unwavering resolve, was both a comfort and a challenge. This was it. The confrontation I had been steadily building towards. The moment when the spoken versus unspoken conflict would finally erupt, shattering the carefully constructed facade of their care. The doorbell rang. Michael opened it, his face already contorted into a frown of surprise, a hint of irritation. He hadn't expected me. Mother? What a...
What a surprise.
Is everything all right? He glanced past me to the idling X7. Elias should have just called. You know, you don't have to come all this way. I needed to deliver something in person. Michael, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the furious resolve churning within me. May I come in? He stepped aside, a reluctant gesture, and I walked past him into the familiar yet increasingly alien hallway. Clara emerged from the living room, a strained smile plastered on her face. Eleanor, what a treat. Are you staying for lunch? No, Clara. I'm afraid not. This won't take long. I sat on the edge of a formal armchair, resisting the urge to sink into its plush depths. I held the envelope in my hand, its weight feeling significant. I've come to address a rather pressing matter, I began, my gaze sweeping from Michael's carefully neutral expression to Clara's feigned composure. It has come to my attention that Michael has been attempting to access my bank accounts again, asserting some form of implied authority. This is, quite frankly, unacceptable. Michael's face flushed. Mother, that's not true. I was merely checking up on things, ensuring everything was in order, just as I always have. No, Michael, I said, my voice cutting through his protest. You have not always done so. And even if you had, that authority ceased to exist when I appointed Mr. Davies as my sole legal representative for all my financial and property matters. I produced the envelope from my handbag and handed it to Michael. This letter, drafted by Mr. Davies, clearly outlines the revocation of any prior implied authority you may have assumed, and formally appoints him as my attorney for financial and legal decisions. It also confirms my sound mental health, as evaluated by an independent medical professional. Michael's hand trembled slightly as he took the envelope. He pulled out the documents, his eyes scanning the legal jargon, his face progressively losing its color. Clara peered over his shoulder, her own eyes widening with each line. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the hum of their perfectly calibrated air conditioning. This is ridiculous. Mother, Michael finally managed, his voice strained. You're clearly unwell. If you're taking these kinds of drastic steps, you're being manipulated by this Davies fellow. No, Michael, I replied, my voice unwavering. I am not unwell, nor am I being manipulated. I am taking control of my own life, a right I believe I am entitled to. And as for Mr. Davies, he is simply ensuring that my wishes are respected, something I have found conspicuously absent from your recent interactions with me. But we were just trying to help you, Eleanor, Clara interjected, her voice rising, losing its saccharine quality. The house is too much. The driving is dangerous. We were just trying to simplify things for you. Simplify things for me, I echoed, my tone sharp with irony. Or simplify things so that you could gain access to my assets, sell my home, and direct my funds towards your own desires. Like perhaps a certain luxury vehicle that you seem so keen for me to acquire. Their faces, already pale, now blanched further. The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air. The X7 sitting just outside was a silent, gleaming testimony to their avarice. This is simply ungrateful, Michael sputtered, crumpling the letter in his hand. After everything we've done for you. Done for me? I stood up, my gaze firm, unwavering. You have attempted to strip me of my independence, to control my finances, and to question my very sanity. You have made me feel like a burden, an inconvenience, a senile old woman, to be managed and patronized, and all while professing your concern for my well-being. I walked towards the door, feeling an unexpected lightness in my steps. From now on, any communication regarding my finances or property will go through Mr. Davies. I expect you to respect my wishes, and I expect you to respect my right to live my life as I see fit, without your help or your interference. I paused at the threshold, turning back to face them, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and dawning realization. As for the car, I added, a small knowing smile touching my lips, it's mine, and I intend to keep it. Not to drive, of course, but as a reminder. A very expensive reminder of who truly holds the keys. I stepped out, closing the door softly behind me, leaving them in the stunned silence of their opulent yet suddenly very hollow home. Elias opened the door for me, and I settled into the back seat of the X7, the scent of new leather a potent perfume of freedom. The confrontation, sharp and swift as it had been, left an indelible mark, not just on Michael and Clara, but on me. The raw ache of betrayal was still there, but now it was tempered by a profound sense of liberation, a quiet satisfaction that resonated deep within my bones. The silence from Michael and Clara was immediate and absolute. No phone calls, no forced visits, no subtle inquiries through distant relatives. It was as if I had vanished, or perhaps as if they had. Mr. Davies confirmed that they had indeed backed off, their attempts to challenge my legal standing quickly thwarted by his firm responses and the clear directives within my newly updated will and power of attorney documents. The X7 remained in my driveway, a silent, gleaming monument to the battle I had won. Elias continued to arrive each morning, and I continued my deliberate, purposeful outings. The car was no longer just a symbol of defiance. It was a conduit to a life I was actively rebuilding. I spent more time tending to my garden, something I had neglected during the years of caring for Arthur and the subsequent onslaught of Michael and Clara's help. The soil felt good beneath my gloved hands, solid and real, unlike the shifting sands of their manipulations. I planted new roses, vibrant colors that reflected the burgeoning hope within me. Emily, my granddaughter, was the unexpected balm for my wounded spirit. She called a few weeks after the confrontation, her voice hesitant. "Grandma, Mom and Dad, they told me some things, but I don't really understand." I invited her over, and we sat in the sunlit conservatory, sipping lemonade. I explained, calmly and factually, the long dance of control and manipulation, the quiet erosion of my independence, and the ultimate audacious demand that had led me to purchase the X7. She listened, her brow furrowed, her young eyes widening with a dawning comprehension. "I always thought something was
Paid you off," she admitted, her voice low.
They were always so quick to say you needed help.
"But you've always seemed so strong to me, Grandma."
Her words were a validation, a comfort beyond measure. Emily began visiting regularly, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to help me in the garden, sometimes to simply sit in comfortable silence. She didn't ask about the X7, but her eyes would often linger on it, a silent understanding passing between us. It wasn't the relationship I had with Michael, burdened by years of unspoken resentments and recent betrayals. It was something new, pure, and refreshingly honest. One afternoon, as Elias drove me past the old community center where Arthur and I used to volunteer, a thought sparked within me. I instructed him to pull over. I looked at the building, at the faded sign, at the memories that suddenly flooded back. Arthur would have wanted me to find a purpose, a way to channel this renewed energy. The next day, I started volunteering there, using the X7 to transport supplies, to drive others who genuinely needed assistance, who couldn't drive themselves. The luxury car, once a symbol of their greed, was now serving a truly benevolent purpose, an ironic twist that would no doubt infuriate Michael and Clara if they ever knew. The house, too, slowly reclaimed its essence, no longer a battleground or a stage. It became my sanctuary once more. I rearranged furniture, discarded items that held bitter memories, and filled it with new life, new plants, new books. It smelled of fresh air and my own chosen potpourri, not the stale scent of their carefully constructed lies. There was still a bittersweet ache, a quiet grief for the family I had lost, for the son who had chosen avarice over filial love. That pain might never fully disappear, a scar reminding me of the price of freedom. But it was no longer a consuming fire. It was a dull throb, a quiet acknowledgement of the past, fading with each passing day. The mirror I had held up to them, the X7, stood as a constant reminder, not of their cruelty, but of my strength. I never did drive the car myself, not in the way they meant, not with my hands on the wheel, navigating the roads, but every time Elias opened the door for me, every time I settled into the plush leather seats, I was driving. I was driving my own life, on my own terms, down a road of my own choosing. They said I shouldn't drive anymore, so I bought the car they wanted. And in doing so, I drove myself to freedom.